We've talked 5G all year, but let's be frank, it's actually been a huge disappointment.
We break down why you should still hold out some hope for 2020. Stick around for your daily charge.
Good morning and welcome to the Daily Charge. It's Tuesday, December 10th. I'm Roger Chang.
And I'm Eli Blumenthal.
Now let's get to today's headlines. 5G has been, well, underwhelming. The next generation wireless technology came into this year with a huge amount of hype, but it was a confusing mess from the start. First, there was at&t's 5GE, which, again, is not real 5G. Then we had Verizon's grand launch in a handful of city blocks. Verizon hooked up a few stadiums as well, but only certain sections could actually access the network. Then T-Mobile last week launched its nationwide network, and as Eli tested last week, speeds were fine, but just a minor boost over 4G. So, Eli, what do you make of all this? It's
still very, very, very early days for 5G.
Right. Do you think the carriers kind of overstepped things by hyping 5G? And we're partly guilty of this because we've written the crap out of 5G. But do you think we went overboard? Did the industry go overboard in hyping up 5G?
Well, I think there's a couple of factors at play. I think 5G does have the potential to really be a transformational technology. That's real.
Yep.
I mean, it's not obviously there yet.
But
in due time, it really can be. It can provide home broadband type internet wherever you are. And there's something to be said for that.
Right.
That will enable a whole host of new things, whether it's driverless cars or, better streaming, telemedicine.
Sure.
All of that is very much possible. But at the same point in time, we have to take baby steps instead of just thinking we can run before we walk.
Right. And I think what the issue I've had, I guess, for this year and really the last year leading up into 2019, there was just a lot of talk and a lot of rhetoric about how 2019 was going to be the year of 5G. You had these first commercial launches, and a lot of these launches turned out to be fairly limited. From a consumer perspective, like the experience has generally not been great.
No, it hasn't.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, Verizon's only on a handful of city blocks.
Yep.
Though on those city blocks, if you're willing to stand outside on those street corners,
they're amazing.
You can get really, really good speeds over a gigabit. at&t has millimeter wave in like 21 cities, but they're not letting anyone touch it yet.
Yep.
That won't be until 2020.
And then lastly, there's Sprint, right? Sprint, which actually I think has probably the best,
Sprint
technically the best network out there.
If I were to rate 5G networks,
Yeah.
Sprint would actually be number one, even though they're only live in 9 cities.
Right.
They actually work indoors and out with a very, very notable speed boost. You're getting 150 to 200 megabits per second indoors, which is great. I replaced my home internet for a couple of days with it, and it was fine. I played Xbox Live, fine. I browsed the web, streamed in 4K. It worked.
Well, so we have some reason to be hopeful for 2020. Shar Tipkin had a nice story over the weekend about why 5G might be better for next year. We're looking at sort of the type of processors, the type of modems that are able to access more bands of 5G. And generally things are going to be better and cheaper and, I don't know, more accessible for people, right?
As happens with technology. Over time, it gets a lot better.
Right.
The early adopters, the first wave has pretty much always been, buggy, for lack of a better term. This hasn't necessarily been buggy, but Generation 2 is going to be a hell of a lot better than Generation 1.
Right. And then Generation 2 is really right around the corner at this point.
Yeah, I mean, the Galaxy S11 has been rumored to be featuring it, and Samsung usually reveals that in around February, March timeframe.
So, yeah, they should kick off a new wave of 5G phones that hopefully
the early part of 2020.
Hopefully are not egregiously expensive. So
fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. All right, speaking of T-Mobile and Sprint, the two companies went to court yesterday to duke it out with more than a dozen state attorneys general who are suing to block their merger. The outcome has huge ramifications for the wireless world. If T-Mobile and Sprint are victorious, the deal could reshape how you get mobile service. They lose, well, a lot of questions about what happens to Sprint. Eli, you were there in court. What'd you see?
So it was kind of an odd first day in court. So the judge actually got rid of opening statements, which kind of threw everything off because both the AGs and T-Mobile Sprint were ready to give their remarks. These are big law firms and really excited to talk. So
they get paid to talk.
They get paid to talk.
Yeah.
That actually delayed things a little bit. The first person up was Roger Soleil, who is T-Mobile, not T-Mobile, who's Sprint's chief marketing officer. He didn't really say too much that was exciting. Not much that we didn't already know about.
Sort of the main talking points?
The status of Sprint. Yeah, he pretty much stuck to that. It'll be interesting to see what happens over the coming weeks when you have people like John Ledger, T-Mobile CEO, Mike Sievert, T-Mobile's COO, but soon to be CEO,
Right.
Neville Ray, Charlie Ergen, the Dish co-founder, who's may be coming in to become a wireless player.
Yeah, in my mind, I think Charlie Ergen is probably the most interesting witness because he really has to make the case that his company is willing to invest and become that viable fourth competitor, something the company has shown no willingness to do in the past.
Right. They've had Spectrum for years.
Right.
Lots and lots of it. And one of the big critiques that the AGs make, and it's a very valid one, is that he has no experience running a wireless company.
Right.
Dish isn't a terribly thriving, satellite company.
Yep.
It's not like they're making money hand over
even
fist.
Even their core business is like not that well run. So,
right. So now all of a sudden you're going to go take a stab at wireless. That's not an easy transition.
Right.
And we're propping up a fourth carrier to replace a fourth carrier. That doesn't really seem like it's going to make a lot of sense. It'll be interesting to see how, I guess, Charlie describes himself and describes his ambitions.
Well, we can only hope that John Ledger will drop a couple F-bombs during his testimony. I doubt it. I know he'll be on his best behavior, but that would be amazing to see in court.
It would. And this trial's going to be pretty quick.
Yep.
Depending on how many hours each side uses, this thing could be wrapped up before Christmas.
That's what the judge said, right? He basically wanted, I don't want to spend Christmas dealing with this.
Yeah,
I want to get this done.
He described either two different scenarios, at least yesterday, December 20th, Friday, December 20th, as one option, or Monday, December 23rd.
Okay.
And kind of was asking both sides to really pick one of those dates and wrap this thing up by then.
Wow. All right. So what are your thoughts on 5G's presence in 2019? Are we not giving the carriers enough credit? And where do you hope they focus their efforts? Sound off, as always, we'll dig the best questions out of the chat and do our best to answer them. BVG, what do we got?
First up, something we should have mentioned yesterday, actually, but this is our last week of shows for the year. We're bringing the 2019 season to a close this week. On Thursday will be the final episode, and at that point, we're on a bit of a abbreviated break. Some of it is for, state holiday as mandated by work. A lot of us are traveling to see family in extended places. And then, of course, we'll be back on January 5th. This is the first day of broadcast, Roger? Help me.
Yeah,
we'll be back for
6th, I believe.
Consumer Electronics Show, CES in Vegas. Either way, we're going to be on site there for an extended time. And then we'll do probably, 3 shows from the stage there, Roger?
I think we're actually doing 4. We're adding a show this year. I think we're going to go media. We're going to do Media Day. So we're starting Monday, running through Thursday.
All right. Well, that's good news because that's going to keep us busy. But yeah, we're going to be off until January 5th. So everybody enjoy your holidays. We'll remind you once again before everything shuts down this week. And in the meantime, let's go ahead and shout out our bonjour to Stuart in Paris. And Eric is out there road warrioring today, so please be safe on the road, and please don't pay too close attention to us. I would advise maybe shutting off the show altogether because we can be quite the distraction. Goddamn Gonzo's got the first really good comment on today's show.
Love that name.
Yeah, me too. Personally, I think there was no point for these carriers to release 5G when there are barely any products out there that use 5G. And I want to tack on there that 5G they rolled out, as you have hammered into the ground, is kind of not really 5G. Is this all just stupid publicity? And where should they have directed their efforts, Roger?
Well, I mean,
it's foundational. You can't just turn on a new network. You have to build to it.
Yes, but I think it's a mix of the two, right? It's foundational in the respect that they do have to build. They do need to take these baby steps to make sure this network works for the broader consumer. But I think that there were a lot of missteps in terms of the way they hyped this technology. Like, it was a little too much. Like, they talked about all these grand things, the kind of game-changing things that 5G would enable, and sort of like the sort of subclause there is, in like 5 or 6 years, as opposed to like, this is all happening now, right? Like, so it's and part of the issue is like the way it's also part of our coverage. Like, I'll be perfectly frank, and like the press industry's coverage of it. We talk about how 5G has the ability to go 10 to 100 times faster than 4G, which is true, but at least this year, like, there are just massive caveats with that, right? Like, you can get that 100 times speed, but you got to stand at the right block, right, city block, and it hasn't been great. So I get that, like, the carriers had to build up the network. There are devices out there. They're generally overly expensive and really not a great investment. But they also needed those devices to be out there. They needed people to buy them and basically be guinea pigs for the maturation of the 5G network. So I feel like that part's necessary, but the way they marketed and the way they pitched it, the industry pitched it, might have gotten a little ahead of itself.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I especially agree with your statement that, they do need people to start using these things so they can fine tune it, which is a really awful thing to say because you don't want to pay $1,300 to be a guinea pig,
which is exactly what you are, though.
But at the same point, down the people who are paying $1,300 are more than happy, to be the beta tester because they get to say they have 5G first.
They could probably afford it. I don't know if do you think consumers like those early adopters buy these phones because they can say they have 5G, or do they actually genuinely believe that like this is going to change my experience? Because I think there's a mix. Some folks are probably spending that amount, and I assume most people who do have the money for the means to do this. But I don't know if people like. And I think we were asked this before. Like I think Alfred asked this question, like who actually goes around saying like, "Hey, I've got the 5G on my phone."
There are a ton of people who like to be the first with something new.
Right.
I mean, we saw that with the iPhone back in 2007, if we want to go back to the last decade.
I mean, I would argue if you were one of the first to have an iPhone, that was actually a pretty impressive thing because you could pull it out. It was tangible. I mean, like I was one of the first to have an iPhone, and that was still the one and only phone that, like got girls to talk to me. I mean, I never actually like sealed the deal because I'm just, I'm a giant loser. But there was a tangible aspect to that phone where like, oh wow, you have the new iPhone. There was a buzz about it, and like you can actually see it and feel it. Whereas 5G is so much more. It's literally just an icon on your phone, right? And half the people, like half the AT&T customers, think they already have 5G. They're not even impressed with your real 5G phone because they've got 5G.
Yeah, no, there's definitely going to need to be some kind of marketing switch next year, and the carriers aren't shy when it comes to marketing.
No,
as evidenced by AT&T and 5G.
And you had a nice breakdown of like all the different 5G terms on your 5G decoded piece, right? There are literally like half a dozen different ways to call 5G 5G.
Everybody has a different name for it.
Yeah.
Everybody has a different experience for it.
Yep.
Whether that
some have multiple names.
Yeah, AT&T's got 3: 5GE, 5G, and 5G Plus.
Shocking coming from the company that's got like 14 streaming services. So,
yes.
Yeah. All with the same name.
All called AT&T TV in some way, and HBO Max.
Right.
Because why not?
Sure. What else we got, Brian?
Oh, well, of course, we got a good one from Matthew Datcher. He says, how does 5G in the U.S. compare to what's going on in Japan?
Ooh, good question. I believe Japan's using midband spectrum, right?
Most of the world is using sub-6.
Yeah.
So midband.
And some low. I don't think anyone's using low band.
Low band, which is under 1 gigahertz.
Right. So they're all using the same kind of spectrum that Sprint is using. So Sprint is like, they're basically in line with what the rest of the world is doing. Right. Which is kind of a weird thing to say. Like Sprint's actually ahead of like the other U.S. carriers.
Which is the exact opposite of what it was with 4G when they were trying
where
to
they're
do
the
like
exact
WiMAX,
last. Yeah.
Which was a technology that failed and LTE took over.
And that kind of sub-6, that mid-band spectrum that Eli's talking about, that's sort of like right now, that's sort of the sweet spot, right? Like it's got a decent amount of range. It's not a huge amount, but it's not like a city block. And the speeds are noticeably better. And so
it's better speeds than low band.
Yep.
Better range than high band, but not the same crazy gigabit speeds that you'll get with millimeter wave.
But I think Japan is like that. I think Korea, from what I understand, has one of the more fully fleshed deployments. Like a lot of Seoul is covered in 5G
with Samsung and LG there.
Yeah. But and the fact that it's like they basically needed to connect one city to say like we've got a huge part of the population. So
I mean, the Olympics next year will be fascinating to see what they do with 5G.
Yeah,
that'll be the first time you could really do a crazy mass market test with a network. Just flood it.
Yeah, you're right.
And one of the big things with 5G is it's supposed to be a lot more efficient and can handle crowds a lot better. So we'll be curious to see how that goes.
We'll see if everyone can get their Instagram feeds up.
But yeah, it will be interesting to see what happens with midband. And there's a lot going on with midband in the United States, which has a relative shortage of the spectrum available. Yeah. There's a big SEC auction that's supposed to happen next year. AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, they're all paying close attention to this. Other players are as well.
And this is also why T-Mobile is so desperate to get that Sprint deal done, because they want that spectrum.
Yeah, the mid-band spectrum is the, I guess, beachfront real estate right now.
Yeah. It's like the missing element for T-Mobile's kind of grand 5G plan.
Mm-hmm. Is GSM versus CDMA still a thing? With the T-Mobile Sprint merger, will GSM or CDMA win?
It is still a thing
CDMA
right
is
now from a
still-
legacy perspective.
CDMA is still a thing, but it's increasingly becoming less so.
Yeah.
Sprint still has it. Verizon still has it. But Verizon, you don't need it anymore.
Right.
If you have like a OnePlus phone, for example, you can use LTE for everything, and you're fine. It used to be that Verizon required you to have a phone on their network that supports LTE, GSM, as well as CDMA for their older network. But their LTE network is so robust right now that they don't even need the CDMA support. They're more than fine having you just use LTE. So is CDMA dead? It's not dead.
I mean, it's alive in the fact that like folks still need to support it for like legacy aspects. But like, if T-Mobile and Sprint seal their deal, like that's gonna get moved out pretty quickly.
I would imagine. I mean, Verizon still has millions of people on their 3G network.
Yeah, they can't.
Well, millions, but it's still millions.
They still need to kind of keep that supported for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm all for 5G, but let's see a full rollout. This is coming from Eric. But what happened to LTE? And before we go down that path, Matthew's also asking, doesn't Verizon still call their 4G LTE?
Yes, LTE and 4G are pretty much synonymous at this point. Everyone uses 4G LTE.
That's what Verizon calls their 4G network. It's 4G LTE.
Right. But in the industry, basically, I mean, LTE is 4G at this point, right? So, I mean, I think you'll see the carriers continue to invest in LTE. That's what the whole AT&T 5GE thing is. It's really what the rest of the industry calls like LTE advanced. It just upgrades to the existing network that make it faster. And so I think it's not going away for a long, long time.
No, LTE will still be a thing. It'll still get better. It should actually get a lot better with 5G as people start moving over. And there's this new idea called dynamic spectrum sharing, or DSS. That is a 5G type technology where it basically will split the network for 5G and 4G automatically, depending on who needs what.
Right.
So that should improve what you're getting with 4G.
Yeah, it's like adding highway lanes and then having the lanes kind of switch as you need them, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To literally deal with traffic.
Yep. That would be awesome for the LIE. If like they just all of a sudden like magically 3 different lanes appeared during traffic, that would be awesome. Not that I deal with rush hour, but whatever.
George Washington Bridge for me. No, that's been
oh
a nightmare.
Yeah.
But anyways, we're getting really way too in the weeds on New York transit situations. To answer the question, 4G LTE is still very much a thing. It still will be a thing for a very foreseeable future.
Yeah.
And at some point it's going to become 5G, but that's not for at least another few years.
And keep in mind, these technologies run for about a decade before like the next one shows up. So
I mean, 3G we were just talking about is still alive.
Still going.
And that's been since at least early aughts.
Right. And even after that decade when the new technology shows up, it doesn't replace the old one. It just is the new one that sort of sits on top as the old one kind of exists. And they all kind of coexist for a while.
There's so much infrastructure that relies on older technologies that you can't just flip a switch as easy as that would be for some carriers to just say, you know what, we're done with this, we're moving on to a new one, just do a software update and we're good.
No.
That's not how this works.
Let's get some clarification on the conversation that's going on in the chat right now. Not too sure, but LTE seems to only support data, but GSM or CDMA will support cellular. Is that true? Following up to that, Eric clarified that LTE is in fact a version of GSM. Can you guys kind of button that up for everybody?
Yeah. LTE is a version of GSM. GSM is the dominant technology now. CDMA is not.
Yeah.
We can pretty much forget CDMA as far as all this goes.
It's like a handful here, Mexico, I think some in South America. It's
like
very limited.
A very small amount of countries.
Yeah.
The U.S. is one of them, but even the U.S. hasn't had a CDMA-based technology, or I guess technically 3G was WCDMA, but that's way too in the weeds.
Yeah.
There hasn't been a traditional CDMA technology in a while.
Right.
Everything is based off of this GSM type of
yeah, and I think
technology.
in terms of the breakdown of like voice versus cellular, I think it was CDMA
and LTE can do voice.
Yeah, it was voice. LTE was voice and data. CDMA like voice and data were like separate
GSM
things.
was voice and data. CDMA could not do voice and data.
Which
that
is
was
why
the whole
when
thing with
you
the
were
iPhone.
when you were on the phone, you couldn't look up something on a browser because it was like one thing only.
Like
phone
Apple
or
had
internet.
ads for like the iPhone 3GS or iPhone 4 with AT&T back when that was an exclusive. AT&T would tout the fact that you can make a phone call while browsing the web on Safari or messaging someone on AIM because this
But
was that long ago.
at this point, the conversation is a little irrelevant since like every phone has 4G LTE at this point and like can do
and
all
every
these
carrier
things.
is doing voice over LTE, so
Yep.
they can do voice and data.
Yep.
All that really doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
It actually seems like you may have answered this in that previous conversation, but the next question that was coming up was, does an HD voice push calls into the LTE bands?
It does.
Yeah.
HD voice is I guess a more data-driven technology.
Yep.
It's using LTE.
You know, you were talking about not being able to multitask while taking a phone call and, say, going on a browser or something like that. I never thought about that before, but I don't think I was even trying to do things like that with older cell phones. Like, as you talk about it, I was going back through my memory. Like, I never noticed that not being a thing. Was I just too stupid and too one-minded to be like, I'm on the phone and that's it? I never tried to browse and never realized that was a thing.
No, BVG, you just cared about the person you were talking to. You were just really committed to the conversation, and
I
that
can
should
see
be
that.
respected.
BVG is a passionate guy. I get that. He's committed to the conversation. No, I was very similar because I was a Verizon customer for a long time. I didn't have voice and data. And like, if you didn't have it, then you didn't really miss it. You didn't really think about doing it. I mean, you saw the ad, you're like, yeah, that sounds nice, but whatever. I got used to doing it. As soon as I hopped over to a GSM-based phone, I was like, oh, this is nice. I can do this now. And like it was like a realization. And keep in mind, if you were connected to Wi-Fi, you could do
Right, if you
voice
had
and data.
Wi-Fi, you were fine.
That's the thing.
I grew up with AT&T as my family's wireless carrier, so it's just something I've been doing. Once I've been on a conversation, someone says, you know, how far is it to whatever, I would open up Google Maps and be able to do that while I was on the phone with them. I felt really, really cool.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
It just was something that was just you do. But yeah, we're fun guys.
What else we got, Brian?
Well, we just got a few minutes left, but let's take this one from Michael Brown. When do you think we'll get 5G for home internet, or will it ever get that fast and affordable?
So there is some now.
So Verizon has 5G home available in a handful of cities, and they're going to expand. This basically functions as like a Fios type of service, where it offers those type of gigabit-like speeds, but those are in markets that you don't have traditional Fios, which is their broadband internet service.
What is it? L.A., Sacramento,
Indianapolis,
Indianapolis.
I believe Houston. I think Sacramento is one of them as well.
Yeah. And even there, like the neighborhoods are super limited. Like I think
it's only 4 or
like
5 of them right now.
in
Chicago's one more.
In LA, it's like somewhere near Chinatown or something, and that's it. Like LA is a big city, and it's really just a handful of areas. So they kept it pretty limited. I think they say they're going to expand it.
They've told me, and we did a story on this not too long ago when they expanded into Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
They are planning to expand.
Right.
This is something that they plan to grow out.
But the timeline's still kind of iffy, right?
A lot of the things with Verizon's timeline is iffy.
Right.
They have said they're going to have 30 cities with 5G for mobile in 2019. They are currently at 18. They have another 10 on their website, so that gets you to 28, which means that there's 10 cities they have to turn on, plus 2 mystery cities.
I mean, they still got a couple of days. There's half the month left.
That's true. That is very true.
Come New Year's Eve. Get ready for that announcement.
Verizon's turning on another 12 cities. But to answer the question about 5G and home broadband, it is increasingly becoming a thing. One of the big tenets of T-Mobile merging with Sprint is that they want to offer a home broadband solution. They say they need Sprint's midband spectrum to do that.
Right.
Whether or not they still will do it without it, who knows? They have a 4G LTE trial going on right now, which takes their existing network and allows you to connect a router to it. We use Sprint's midband 5G here in New York, as I mentioned earlier, to do some type of how does this work? Could this replace my home broadband? And it did. It worked fine. The one thing that will have to change with a lot of these 5G home technologies are data caps. So if you're using a mobile network, there's currently no real... Sprint doesn't have a home plan. You're just using their 100 gig data plan, which if you're streaming 4K,
that goes away really
through
fast
in like a week.
Yep.
I watched a half-hour movie, and I think it was like 4 gigs, 8 gigs.
Wow.
So, not a half-hour movie. It was a half-hour TV show, comedians in cars getting coffee.
Okay.
And it just burned through it. As for Verizon, they don't have data caps for their 5G home service.
Right. But again, the service is
super limited.
It's so limited that, they can do whatever they want with the test trial, right? And so...
But they are expanding, so they say.
So they say. And T-Mobile is part of that whole pitched to get this deal done. They vowed to connect 10 million households with mobile broadband
and give them free broadband.
These are family low income houses with children. That's sort of the point, giving them connectivity. But yeah, so that's where they would want to use the 5G for.
Here's a good question, and a shout out to Camrez, who I don't think I've recognized your name in the chat before, but if you've been there, apologize either way. Welcome to the show, new friend of the show, Camrez. My question is, do you have any idea if 5G with Li-Fi features will be coming at any point, or if there are going to be other similar type options that would be functioning basically like Li-Fi?
Like Wi-Fi or Li-Fi?
Li-Fi. L-I.
That is using light.
Sure.
I think it's using light for data transmission.
I haven't heard anything about that.
Yeah. Light fidelity.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything about that.
I
the interesting thing I'm curious about in 2020 is we get to these low Earth orbit satellite internet providers, and a lot of companies have been talking about that. SpaceX is one of them.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting to see how that plays as a possible alternative to cellular or to traditional Wi-Fi.
Or apparently this Li-Fi thing.
Or I guess Li-Fi.
Which, no, we haven't, like, in terms of the
no carriers
traditional
have been touting Li-Fi. I wouldn't be surprised if some of them are experimenting with it.
Sure.
Because it behooves them to experiment with everything. But as far as commercial deployments, I haven't heard anything about Li-Fi.
I'm not really familiar with Li-Fi. Where does that actually kind of crop up? Where's that being used these days?
It's not. I think it's
a theoretical technology that's being explored.
Yeah.
I don't know. Cameras, if you got more information, feel free to...
I think Philips is working on it.
There are companies that have been experimenting with it in the home for various things, but not for like a wide-ranging 5G cellular-like technology.
Interesting thoughts and process, though, Cameras.
Great question.
Yeah, we'll see where that one goes.
Stumped us.
Definitely. I think that's it for today, everybody. Again, reminder, we've only got 2 shows left in the 2019 season, tomorrow and Thursday, and we're looking forward to having you for them, and then looking forward to, I think, a well-deserved break for us all around the table, and then we'll see you again at CES in early January. But until then, have a great evening, everyone. Thanks for your comments and questions. Invite your friends. We'll see you all tomorrow. Roger.
Yeah, hey, we'd appreciate it if you would subscribe and ring the notification bell if you haven't already, so you can join us weekday mornings and be part of the show. Also, feel free to head on down to the show description, where you can find links to today's stories and every place you can subscribe to the audio podcast if you'd rather take the show on the go. For the Daily Charge, I'm Roger Chang.
I'm Eli Blumenthal.
Thanks for joining us.